Hello and welcome to Daily Politics on Trust TV. On this program, we discuss issues around politics, policy, and governance. I am Shafiu Suleiman. Amid criticisms over his call for residents to arm themselves in defense against bandits, Zamfara State Governor Bello Mutawalle has signed into law a bill for the prohibition and punishment for banditry, cattle rustling, cultism, kidnapping, terrorism, and other incidental offenses. The bill is aimed at providing a framework for the prosecution of persons engaged in the acts of banditry, kidnapping, cattle rustling, and other related crimes. Matawalle had explained that his directives for citizens to obtain firearms against bandits is to assist security agencies in addressing the menace. However, some security experts are expressing reservation over the move, with the Chief of Defense Staff General Lucky Rabo reminding the governor he lacks the requisite powers to direct the State Police Commissioner to issue such licenses. What are the implications of the Zamfara State government's directive on the overall safety of the citizens? Could there be alternatives to this decision? What impact would it make in dealing with rampaging banditry and terrorism in the state? These and many more will form the basis of our conversation. And joining us to engage the issues are Stephen Okori, a security expert. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me.
Also joining us for the discussion is our in-house analyst, Kainde Modu. Thank you for joining us.
Always glad to be here.
And via Skype, we hope to be joined by Ibrahim Dosara, who happens to be the Commissioner of Information in Zamfara State. Incidentally, he also signed that press release or communication conveying the message of the governor with regards to the call to arm, against banditry. Now, let's take a quick break. When we return, the conversation commences. Thank you very much for joining us. And now the conversation begins. And I'll go straight to Mr. Stephen, looking at the situation in Zamfara and by extension, some northwestern states, the rampaging banditry, now full-blown terrorism, some say. Zamfara happened to be, is being considered as an epicenter of this challenge. A number of communities have been sacked by these bandits or terrorists. Farming communities are made to pay levies and what have you. A number of citizens, have been displaced. And of course, the killing continues. Now the state government seems to be on the edge, and it has to come up with a very, very drastic measure, talking about arming the citizens. What does it, how does it sound to you? You hear a governor who is the chief security officer of a state whose primary responsibility is to protect lives and property, telling citizens to acquire arms and protect themselves.
Yeah, thank you very much for inviting me to share my view on the topic. I want to start by saying that the governor came to power and inherited all these challenges we just listed here. And he has tried his best to see how to go by way of application of force and the other means of not applying force. Where we saw where he tried to see how to grant amnesty, tried to see how to dialogue with leaders of these bandits and terrorist groups, tried to see how to reconcile with them, and so far those efforts are not yielding results at all. Rather than a decrease in the situation, we are seeing an uprise, And I want to say that as a chief security officer of the state, permit me to use the word that the man is so frustrated as we speak, see your citizens that you are supposed to be protecting dying like chickens, you know. So I think he has tried to see how to derive a different means or approach to it now by trying to come up with a law, at least to guide what he's trying to do. I want to say further that it is not a bad suggestion. That's my own view, you know. But I want to differ from individuals owning these guns or ammunitions. I want to see that it should be group of people. For instance, if you want to bring the vigilante group of people on board, it should be assigned to group of individuals.
Perhaps that can be easily monitored.
That can be easily
where regulation can also be applied.
Exactly. You know, where they will have a leader, a deputy leader, and all that. Where you see a structure, you know, on ground in all these communities that are in Zamfara. You know, by the time you assign these guns to them, they will be marked. You know. They will be marked where it can be easily be traced. You know that XYZ community has this kind of guns and they are marked. If they transfer those guns to another community, you'll be able to trace that they've been moved to another community. You know, because vigilante groups are supposed to protect their own communities, not going aside their own community for protection.
Right. Okay. If I understand the logic, perhaps you know why the governor has to call on the citizens to arm themselves. Looking at the nature of the attacks by these bandits or terrorists, you know, they go into communities indiscriminately, these farming communities and what have you, and unannounced, you know, because of the vulnerability and of course the nature of the space there. A number of, a situation more like an ungoverned space, so to speak, to find people living in distant villages and so on. And then perhaps that's the reason why the governor is looking at the citizens arming themselves, because they are the direct, you know, target of these bandits. But the implication, just like he said, is perhaps that of control and regulation. But before we get to that, even the responsibility of granting licensing, you know, licenses to gun owners. Some would say it's beyond the governor because it has to do with the state commissioner of police, whatever, and then it also had to be with the approval, perhaps, of the IG and so on. But it, issuing a directive to a commissioner of police, who is not under the state government's, you know, control. How does this sound to you?
The implications is what I'm looking at. Nigeria is one of the countries in the West African sub-region that is beset with this problem of proliferation of small arms and light weapons. And despite the efforts to, you know, control the flow of these weapons in the sub-region, there hasn't really been much success. And that is because, and that's because the flow is fueled by conflict in countries like in Mali, like in the Central African Republic, like, you know, along that corridor, there has been a proliferation of small arms and light weapons, starting from the conflict in Liberia and the conflict in Sierra Leone.
Libya as well.
Libya as well. So, getting a control of arms crossing the border is difficult as it is. To now license people to carry arms will probably turn the whole region into the wild, wild west as we know it. How do you control? Well, the weapons are issued for military and protection purposes. But how do you control the use of weapons in civil engagements? Because, you know, one thing about power is that it corrupts and corrupts absolutely. So you already have incidents of people, killings rising that don't even involve guns and AK-47s and all those caliber of weapons.
Yeah, but it's some sort of limitation. I think the governor is targeting, or the government is targeting people who are qualified, people who, I mean, who deserve such licenses.
How do you define?
That's the bottom line. What are the yardsticks to determine who actually?
Who's going to determine? It's not a bad idea if you can control, but you know it might result in things going more out of hand. What we had, what the president of the Federal Republic signed about 2 years ago was a national security strategy that would take care of security from bottom up, starting from the communities, that there had to be a linkage all the way through. That has not been implemented. So what we have in the country is policies that are rolled out, and then there's a difficulty in implementing them, because if that strategy had been implemented the way it should have been implemented, there should have been a drastic reduction in penetration into communities.
But then beyond the strategy and the national security, national defense or security policy that we talked about, one fundamental reason behind this action, some will say, is the limitation, or rather the paucity of manpower, the personnel, the boots on ground. You know, security personnel are grossly inadequate to reach out to these communities who are being ravaged by this. And of course, we all know that there are also issues around logistics, you know, communication logistics, movement, I mean, transportation logistics and what have you for the security agencies. Is it, some are beginning to even look at this decision by the Zamfara state government as sort of, you know, a vote of no confidence on the security agencies. Perhaps it has reached a point of complete failure. Do you see it as such?
Obviously, I would say that it has gotten to that. I'm going to talk or speak from a professional angle. It has come to the level that citizens have passed a vote of no confidence on the security agencies. I think that if you ask me, they are trying their best, but their best is still not good enough, because we cannot see or keep seeing people being killed on daily basis. It's happening on daily basis. People are being kidnapped on daily basis.
It has become a new normal.
Yes. So, for me, we are trying to look at some sort of solutions beyond what the government is doing.
Yeah, we'll be talking about the solutions. You also mentioned earlier on that the government has tried several options. In the first place, when the governor came on board and he came with the idea of dialogue and amnesty, a lot of people, you know, cautioned him, yes, I mean, against doing that. Because in a way, some see it as emboldening the criminals, you know, letting them know or getting them to understand that they are even bigger than the state. They are at the, I mean, they are more like, now dictating what the government should do. Instead of going all out against them, the government is appeasing them, or, you know, trying to make them, you know, drop their arms and what have you. But that didn't work out. At some point, he was even buying, you know, he was buying the guns. He asked them to come, you bring your gun and you'll pay you, I think, double or triple what you buy the gun and what have you. And then several options. But in the end, this is where we are. Is it about, I mean, lack of policy direction right from the beginning? Or is it that the government and its security advisors are also lacking the necessary strategy, you know, to deal with this challenge head on?
Apart from strategy, you also have to look at unity in the whole system from top to bottom. The problem is that there's been an evasion of that unity. Everybody is doing his own thing. Separately. You have even within the security agencies, there is no, they have admitted that intelligence reports,
sharing and what have you.
Intelligence sharing and all that is not a unified thing. Now, I'm not talking as an expert, but these are things that we've seen and heard. So it's not about the strategy. It's about the implementation of the strategy. How well has the strategy been implemented? So when you talk about, that's why the introduction or this new direction of getting citizens to bear arms is dangerous, if I may say so, because how do you implement that policy to see that it doesn't break down? Now, citizens have, yes, lost confidence in the ability of security agencies to secure them. But are we at that point in which we'll now we're now letting a Hobbesian state of nature and there's no control? Everybody's, because you get to a point that we're getting to a point now that there is mob action among citizens. People will just decide who is guilty and not guilty, and instant justice is meted out. If we have that kind of situation now, do we now go further to worsen the situation by putting arms in the hands of such
and it
people?
seems to be a kind of policy somersault. You are mopping up, arms and ammunition from perceived, non-state actors, and then at the same time you are also arming the citizens. But sort of contradiction, some would say.
It's a different ballgame entirely.
Right.
You are mopping from non-state actors that are owning these guns illegally. You are arming citizens that are ready to defend their community legally. So the governor of Zamfara knows that it's a process to obtain these licenses. Although there's an embargo on obtaining
that's
a
one
license.
thing. Even the commissioner of police in the state has, came out to say that it is still in force. The embargo on licensing of guns is still in force. So now the directive, right from it's dead on arrival, so to speak.
It won't hold water.
So where does the governor derive such powers or such motivation to issue such a directive?
I think his special advisor on security did not properly inform him, because if he's aware that there's an embargo, he won't begin to give such a directive, I think there's a misinformation there. But going forward, I think there are other means that they are trying to see how to handle the situation. But in handling the situation, you cannot handle such situations with bare hands against people coming with arms,
There's this saying that, I think one assistant director, National Rifle Association in the United States once said, to stop a bad guy with a gun, you need a good guy with a gun.
Exactly.
So, to some extent, some would say it's a balance of power kind of arrangement.
We still have good guys here.
Because without, such a deterrence, this criminal gangs or this terrorists will continue to have a field day.
Exactly.
So, but then how do we go about it? That is a fundamental question. You did mention, perhaps the need for a sort of, an organized intervention. Now, having, for instance, the vigilantes and what have you, in a way that, they can be properly managed. Some southwestern states have adopted what they call a motikun. It's a regional, intervention, and then a civilian kind of intervention. But it's working. There are gadgets, there are mobilities and what have you. Even the guns, perhaps, but in a controlled manner. So what stops, for instance, the Zamfara state government from adopting such a similar initiative? And then not just Zamfara state, because Zamfara state, the impact of the banditry or the terrorism that is taking place there is beyond Zamfara state. It's contagious to other states. What stops perhaps the governors from coming together to adopt such a measure?
You see, I want to blame it on the special advisors on security to the governors. I mean, it's left for them to begin to see how to develop such framework, you know, to see how to police the region, you know. So they are supposed to think outside the box. I want to give credit to the advisors, to the governors in the southwestern region, because most of this idea about the Amotekun, especially that of Oyo State, he happens to be former commissioner of police, you know, you see that these ideas came from them. So the advisors to the governors on security, you know, I think they are napping, you know, and you see, it's high time we begin to see how to take politics out of security,
matters.
you know, because security, I think, is a professional thing, and it should be handled professionally, you know. You cannot begin, I give you an instance, the Commissioner for Internal Security and Home Affairs in Kaduna State. I begin to wonder his background as a security expert or something. You know, he's a journalist. So we should be able to put square pegs.
Even though as journalists we are said to be a jack of all trades, perhaps we have basic knowledge around virtually everything. And then he's not just alone, perhaps he has other security experts around
working with him. But let the right thing be done. You know, even at the federal level, we are still facing the same thing. You know, you have the Minister of Interior. What is security background? The Minister of Police Affairs. And the challenges we are talking about here are internal security challenges. And people that are manning ministries that has to do with handling or combating challenges internally, I don't even have security background.
Now, the implication of all of this, before now, I think last year or so, President Muhammadu Buhari issued an order, a shoot-aside order, you know, on anyone found, you know, holding AK-47 or something. And then here we are with this kind of directive. Even though we are yet to see the impact of that, since the non-state actors are still there having a field day, some will say, even residents will testify that they move around, you know, with their guns, sometimes in large numbers without being checked. So, looking at such a directive, you know, and then finding people bearing arms of whatever nature, how do you see the conflict, or what could be, you know, I mean, in terms of relationship between security agencies and the citizens in this?
It also depends on the grade of weapons, you know, because I don't think the Zamfara state governor was talking about assault rifles or grenade, rocket launchers and all that. I think he was just talking about arming the citizens to be ready to repel, you know, in the short run, before you have security agencies coming to reinforce them. But see, the idea of the federal government is that anybody that is carrying an arm that is above a certain grade and is not licensed is carrying it illegally. The point about that is how many have been arrested. Now, how were these people armed? Then have you been able to break down who are the suppliers of arms? From where did they come from? Have we been able to talk about closing down our borders so that there won't be arms just flowing across the borders? And then you found out that the customs has also done its job, intercepted arms that are meant to come into the country. All this is what has contributed to the number of arms that are in the country. And this is not something that happened overnight. These arms got into the country either by these non-state actors being armed for political purposes, or, you know, inability to stop people from crossing over the borders because the borders are porous. There are a lot of factors that have contributed to this over the years. I remember as early as 2012, I spoke with the then governor of Benue State, Gabriel Suswan, who talked about people, crossing in trailers into the Benue Trough. And he said, Benue State, the distance between Benue State and the borders is a bit of a distance. So you can imagine crossing all over, across the distance they would have to cross. And they were not
Are these
stopped.
people actually within, or those coming from outside?
Coming from outside.
Because I've heard the governor talking about, a number of some of these criminals coming from
President Buhari had
countries.
said that the combatants in the guys bearing arms are people from Libya. And he has said it several times, that there are people, there are combatants that were trained to fight
Gaddafi.
to fight the war. And when Gaddafi fell, they came into fertile ground because they could, ply their trade here.
Those mercenaries.
The mercenaries.
Right.
And so kidnapping has become a very fertile trade because, if you fight war over there and you have resistance there, you come into a space where there is no resistance, you come in and occupy.
Talking about non-resistance and non-deterrence as well, and perhaps lack of synergy, because, the state government seems to be alone here. The federal government and security agencies, just like you said, they're doing their best, but we're yet to see, an impact in terms of stopping the proliferation of arms into the country, in terms of, dealing with those arrested or those found culpable in the whole, challenge. Remember, it is not just about the non-state actors, there are collaborators. I think fundamentally the state government is also worried about this issue of informants, who have been fueling the crisis because of what they are benefiting. And these informants cut across, they are not just within the citizens, they are also sometimes in government, sometimes within the security architecture and what have you. It seems, a very complex situation. And what role do you see, federal government playing and its agencies in rescuing the states who are becoming helpless?
The roles are enormous. First of all, there should be punishment melted to people that are found culpable or involved in trying to see how to sabotage the effort of government, because there are a lot of saboteurs in the system. When we blame it on the security agencies, it's not just the military or the police alone. It's the duty of the customs to see that arms don't come into the country illegally. We have seen where the arms came in through the ports, So there's this compromise on the part of
some bad eggs
within the system, They compromise, We have seen where victims that were kidnapped said that the kidnappers, some of them don't even speak Nigerian languages.
That's right.
Whose duty is that? Is it the immigration? Okay. So I think they are failing in all departments. Because if the immigration are doing their job, there's a way that immigrants cannot just come in and begin to inflict pains on the citizens of the country.
Okay, I think we have Ibrahim Dosara right now joining us from Gusau, the Zamfara State capital. Happens to be the Commissioner of Information in that state and a very close, aid, to the governor. Malam Ibrahim Dosara, thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Shafiu, and other guests in the studio.
Right. Okay, we would like you to give us perhaps the feelings or the situation or the compelling need for this very drastic action by the Zamfara state government. How would you explain to an average Nigerian the situation Zamfara finds itself in terms of this security challenge that we're talking about?
Well, good evening, viewers. The situation that led Zamfara state government to take the drastic action it is taking today is the long time Zamfara people have been suffering the mayhem of the bandits. It is over a decade now. Zamfara State people are being killed, are being maimed, are being kidnapped, women being raped, children being turned to orphans. His Excellency, the Governor, has searched severally for lasting solution to the problem, and we are yet to reach the land, the promised land. So if you could recall, he in the first place invited the bandits for reconciliation, and we did reconciliation. Many of the bandits embraced the reconciliation, and we were almost there, where the 9 months out.
Okay, I think we are finding it difficult with the technology there. We'll come back to you, Ibrahim Dosara, for more. Okay, I think we can hear you now.
Zamfara, yeah, Zamfara State spent over 9 months without any banditry incident in the state, and because of the activities of conflict entrepreneurs, that success we had was scuttled. Now, His Excellency went on another search where he gave the bandits an ultimatum to embrace the peace process, or else he will confront them. And after the expiration of the 6 months period, His Excellency confronted the bandits who refused to embrace the reconciliation process by shutting down network communications, closing down all avenues through which the bandits are using to commit heinous acts on people or attacks on communities. That also has reduced drastically the capacity of the bandits to attacking people. But thereafter, the conflict entrepreneurs went in and scuttled that success we had. And now His Excellency feels that as responsible government, he should continue to search for the solution to the problem. This is after he has even went far to connive or have synergy with the government of Niger Republic, where they agreed to block all the routes these bandits are getting the weapons, and also went ahead to supply or to provide logistic support to the Nigerian government to do the job. Okay. Now, all these things, yes, the conflict entrepreneurs couldn't allow this. Yes. And yet Zamfara State have been facing the problem, like I said, over a decade. Right. And this is why His Excellency feel it is right time to invite the people to participate in the search for the solution, right, by preparing their minds to get weapons, legitimate weapons with which to defend themselves. And this is where we are today.
Right, talking about getting legitimate weapons, a number of people have been faulting, the line of communication. When a governor, who is elected as a civilian governor, for instance, and then we have a commissioner of police who is answerable to the federal government, for instance, and then issuing a directive to him to issue licenses, to citizens to bear arms. There is a lot of question around where the governor derives such powers to issue such a directive. That's one. Two, you talked extensively about the role of conflict entrepreneurs in this situation. There has been concerns over the lack of implementation, or implementation of punitive measures, or taking, the political will, to take certain drastic actions, just like the governor did. There was a committee, the report of the MD Yusuf committee, which perhaps indicted a number of people, including traditional institutions and so on. And then we're yet to see some sort of, implementation of that, the recommendations of that committee. How would you explain some of this lacunas?
You see, in the first place, you have spoken about the directives to CP to issue license. We have made clarification regarding this. We said we are quite aware that there is even existing ban on acquisition of legitimate weapons in Nigeria. We agree with that. But what we said, we prepare the minds of our people. We are preparing, or we have prepared forms which we will distribute to the people in the 19 emirate councils to feel after they have been scrutinized by the traditional rulers and the local authorities there, after which these forms will be forwarded to the CP to do his own background check. And after he has confirmed that these people are legitimate and they are not with any questionable character, will then pass the recommendation to the Inspector General of Police, whose responsibility is to issue the license upon the approval of Mr. President. And we said Mr. President is quite aware of the situation in Zamfara State. He too was in Zamfara State twice to show the extent of his concern about the security situation in Zamfara State. And we agree and we believe he will consider and see reason behind the call for people to have legitimate weapons. After all, what will you say about other Nigerians who are having legitimate weapons? If you conduct such or population census, not less than 1 million people may have these legitimate weapons among the elite. So it is not outside the context of the Nigerian constitution to grant such legitimate weapons or to grant license for people in the rural areas to acquire legitimate weapons to defend themselves. We are in a very critical situation in Zamfara State, which calls for that. And
the second leg of the question.
Sorry?
The second leg of my question, talking about the conflict entrepreneurs and what the government is doing, to fish them out and perhaps take the necessary steps, to either prosecute them or do the needful in terms of addressing the problem.
And that is why we came up with this new law, which provides for punishment for the conflict entrepreneurs when they are caught red-handed. So the government is doing everything possible. The governor signed Executive Order 7, which allow him to establish 4 committees on security issues, and which he did. And he also signed into law a bill that provides for punishment for such people committing crimes of banditry and other terrorism, and those who are helping them, and those who are engaged in cultism, and those who are abating and helping those people to commit such atrocities. So His Excellency is doing everything possible to ensure the implementation of these strategies, which are aimed at curtailing the problem of insecurity in Zamfara State. You are quite aware that providing security is #1 function of any government anywhere. And as a responsible government, the government of Zamfara State, under the leadership of His Excellency Governor Bello Matawalle Maraden, is doing everything to ensure the discharge of that constitutional responsibility assigned to him as the governor of the state.
Ibrahim Dosara, I know that in the underlying reason behind the rise in especially banditry in Zamfara State, which is now seen in the epicenter of this crisis, was predicated on the conflict or the crisis between farmers and herders. At some point, the involvement of NSAKI, these vigilante groups and so on. The governor has been talking about that consistently as reason behind this growing challenge. Have you thought of the implications of licensing people to own guns in this context? Because it could perhaps also fuel this conflict between the farmers and herders, looking at the fragile, mutual understanding or respect or coexistence among them.
That is, you are talking when things are allowed to go out of legitimacy. What we are doing, we said we are going to follow the legitimate ways provided by the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria to obtain licenses for the people in the rural areas who are being attacked on daily basis to acquire license to possess weapons with which to defend themselves. That is why we said we designed forms which we forwarded to the emirate, the 19 emirate councils in the state, to do background checking on whoever wants to acquire or possess the legitimate weapons. And nobody will be allowed as long as he has a criminal record or as long as he is irresponsible. So all those that are going to possess these legal or rather legitimate weapons are those who are responsible, who have good records, who are obtaining these weapons.
Okay, I think, well, we lost audio there, but it's also about time we take a break. In case you're just joining us, we're looking at the Zamfara gun licensing issue and, of course, the challenges on banditry. And we've been interfacing with our guests here in the studio and the Commissioner for Information in Zamfara State, Ibrahim Dosara, just giving us, an update with regards to this decision. We'll take a short break. When we return, we'll round up on the program. There's much to talk about, but I understand time is really fast spent. We'll take a break. We'll be back shortly. Thank you very much for staying with us. It's still Daily Politics. We're looking at the situation in Zamfara State with regards to the directive of the state government on citizens, to acquire legitimate arms to defend themselves against bandits and, of course, other criminal elements terrorizing them over the years. Before we go back to Dosara, Mr. Kainde, you've heard, some of the perspectives, the reasons why the government has to take such a compelling, decision against this rampaging banditry. What do you make up with, reasons behind this action?
Well, I do believe that the state government has a legitimate right to seek options to end what is a critical situation within its space. And I also believe that probably the state government has looked at all the options critically. But there's still the worry because it's talked about conflict entrepreneurs. And there's also still the worry about collaborators. Where do we find all these groups of people? And how do you ensure that guns do not fall into the wrong hands? Which is the whole genesis of this crisis in the first place. If guns fall into the wrong hands.
That's right. Yeah, I think he was talking about the safeguards, how they can protect them from getting into the wrong hands. But I don't know what you make up with the parameters, and the safeguards he was talking about.
Yeah, it's a better approach to it. He talked about due diligence, background check on people that will be assigned such guns. I want to believe that the emirs or district heads or village heads, they know the bad guys within their communities, you know. So by the time they want to begin to see how to harness or select these people that will be assigned, or that they will give the forms to see how to go about filling them, they will know the ones that have questionable characters, you know. So I think it's a better way to go about it in the sense of trying to see that the guns get to the hands of good guys.
Okay, we'll gradually round it up. Bottom line is to see that, you know, this drastic, or, you know, an end to this terrorism that we're talking about. But then, looking at the targets, some will say, in the first place, arming the citizens, you know, acquiring even the arms in the first place, looking at the purchasing power of the people and what they are going through at the moment. A number of them are not even talking about perhaps returning to their homes, those that have been displaced. They're actually looking for how to survive, for instance. Look, do you think it is actually targeting the right people? Because we're talking about rural communities who are battling, you know, to feed, and then asking them to acquire arms. We know this is capital intensive. Could it be that, you know, it will end up, I mean, arming those, the well-to-do, so to speak, or those within the...
That's what I'm talking about. Guns falling into the wrong hands. And what grade of guns are we talking about? You know, and then who are we targeting? If we're targeting, for instance, local security outfits, vigilantes and all that, how do we ensure that some are not compromised? These are all a whole lot of issues that I believe
need to be looked at.
the state government is already looking at.
Okay, looking at the targets, you know, and the explanation by the commissioner.
Yeah.
Do you see an end result? You know, do we? Is the state government likely going to achieve the results? Because ultimate aim is to confront these criminal elements, is to empower the people to rise up against it and then address it promptly. Do you see a result at the end?
Yeah, certainly I see a result at the end. You see, the whole idea is about starting something. When you start, as you get along, you begin to see gaps. And as you get along, you begin to see how to improve on the gap. You know, so from what the Commissioner of Information has said, I want to believe that they are in the right direction.
Taking the right direction.
Yes.
Okay, let's go back to the Commissioner to round up. Bala Ibrahim Dosara, if you're there, would like you to get your last line on this discussion. Ibrahim Dosara, are you there? Oh, okay, we lost the audio. Would have wanted to give him the opportunity to give us his last line. But still coming back to the issues. Yes, we're rounding up now. Yeah. Yes, Zamfara State is taking a decision. It's taking a drastic measure. We've seen what happened in the past when the government came up with this ban on, I mean, shut down the networks and what have you. They move, you know, inward, move to other states that are contagious and what have you. Do you see us having an impact? You know, a kind of result that is needed with a state taking action, leaving others who are also facing the same challenge?
That's the point we're talking about. There's got to be that unity in the security structure. Everybody has got to see that this security is our joint business. The reason why these things deteriorated to this level is because when these manifestations started, other states that it hadn't happened in their states saw it as, oh, that's their business. It doesn't concern us.
Right.
Now it's spreading all across. And so there has to still be that unified structure, because if you repel them in the states,
they move.
They move.
That's right.
And they find alternate strategies. So this might be a desperate move to check, but it should also be a move that will look beyond the immediate
state?
Immediate result.
All right. Okay, let me get to your last line. How do we, arrive at the kind of solution that is needed? I mean, the result that is expected.
Yeah, what is key here is collaboration amongst the security agencies, and we're working with the Zamfara state government as well. They need to look at the policy or the framework that the government is trying to bring on board. Working with the Zamfara state government, it needs supervision. So I think there's need for synergy. With that.
Okay.
They will get results.
Among the state and, of course, among the state and the security agencies.
Exactly.
Thank you very much, Stephen Okore,
Yeah.
a special security expert,
Yeah.
and, of course, Ms. Kande Amudu.
Thank you.
Thank you also for your perspectives. We also appreciate the inputs coming from Ibrahim Dosara, the Commissioner for Information, Zamfara State. Giving us background and, of course, updates with regards to this measure taken by the state government. On their behalf and the technical crew, this is where we come to the end of the program. Thank you very much for staying with us. I'm Shafiu Suleiman.